Hey everybody, Questwise here, and today, as promised, we're going to start our re-exploration of Dungeons and Dragons 2nd Edition. I'm going to do kind of a series of these, showing you my reacquaintance with the game, as it were. I want to run this game again, but before I do, I kind of want to uh, realign myself with the rules and go over some things, and I thought I would share those things with you as I slowly go through the process of getting reacquainted with this game and the different tools and books and items that I'm going to use to run the game. Today I'm just going to give you my initial impressions. Re-impression? I don't know. If you've seen some of my videos before, you know that this is the game I spent the most time with overall in my gaming career. I started off, you've heard the story dozens of times, I tell it all the time, but my introduction into gaming was through a friend of my cousin's who taught me how to play. He introduced me to Palladium books, and he taught me how to play Heroes Unlimited, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Other Strangeness, Rifts, all of that. And when I came back home after that summer with my cousin to northern Michigan, where I live currently, those things hadn't arrived yet. This was going to be, early 90s, 90, 91, somewhere in there. And so I, checked out my local bookstore, which at that time would have been a Walden Books in our mall. They didn't have Palladium books, but they had this. This was really new. I think this came out in 1989. I could check again. I'm just kind of pretty sure the 2nd edition came out in 1989. So 91. So that I picked this up, 92, somewhere in there, and was captivated. I loved it. I already loved fantasy and history at the time, and so this was a perfect fit. And I read this book cover to cover. You may have seen over on Facebook, this is my original copy. I have 2 more copies of the Player's Handbook in my collection, but this is my original copy. It's seen some better days. There are pages in here. Everything's complete, but there are pages that are loose. It's taken a beating, but this survived through a couple of years of high school, all the way through college and beyond with me. Before I actually started sort of a big collection. A lot of my stuff from 2nd edition has gone to other places or just been misplaced, but I do have still a decent collection, and I plan on maybe seeking out some more through some avenues online and stuff as well too. But Jason Mabry, who has a channel called November Sun, was talking about his introduction into gaming and how he would drop everything in a heartbeat just to play 2nd edition again. And that got me thinking, and I grabbed this book off the shelf, and this book has I have a lot of history with this book, and he's right. I think having flipped through it again and started to reread it, I too would drop everything just to play this game again and play it as it is. Now, in one of the future videos, I'm also going to talk about other ways that you can get the 2nd edition experience without having to go and try to seek out this stuff. Sometimes this stuff can be a little hard to find. Sometimes it can be kind of expensive to get decent copies of as well too. So I'm going to do a future video on finding other ways to get the 2nd edition experience without having to track down some of this stuff, and we'll get to that kind of thing. I also want to talk about, I might not do actual plays here on the channel, but I will do some play recaps once we get started. I do want to go through a character creation video and stuff as well too, but today I just wanted to talk about sort of mentally, spiritually, what this game sort of means to me, and the things that I'm excited about revisiting that current games or other games that I'm playing now just don't capture for me in this. So I'm going to be using the Player's Handbook, definitely. One of my other favorite books from that line was the Dungeon Master's Guide. I feel like this thing had a ton of stuff that I used through a bunch of different other games when I decided to begin to expand and explore other types of games. I kept coming back to this for inspiration and stuff, and this particular book I used a lot more so than any other book, just for inspiration and for other reference type material and stuff as well. But I really, really loved this book a lot. And then for a while after high school, once I got into college and met a bunch of people there, we began to use these world setting campaign guides. I think they were just called the Adventures series. There's the Greyhawk one. There was a Dragonlance one, the ones I have as well too. I have a signed copy of the Dragonlance one. That was pretty cool. That I got signed a couple of years ago at Gen Con. The one that's been kind of elusive to me is Forgotten Realms, and Forgotten Realms was always my favorite setting. When I got into D&D and I started to read some of the novels, I started to read, of course, R.A. Salvatore's stuff, The Crystal Shard, Halfling's Gem, Streams of Silver, that kind of stuff. But I also began to read things like Darkwalker on Moonshae, and I fell in love with that, and I read all of those novels. And so the Forgotten Realms became, for me, very, very important. I began to, dive hardcore into Realms lore, and that was my favorite setting. That's where I always wanted to play in. When I got to college, one of my very close friends was huge. He had been brought up with Greyhawk, and had used this book a lot for and Adventures as well too, and some of the box sets. I think From the Ashes was the box set was called, to run games, and I quickly fell in love and could see why he loved the appeal of Greyhawk as well too, and so began to fall in love with that. And these were cool because these were actually designed, I can show you on the camera, to be compatible with first edition and second edition. So we used these a lot. We dabbled with some Dragonlance for a while as well too, but Greyhawk and Forgotten Realms is what we always seem to come back to. And then of course we began to expand into things like Spelljammer and Dark Sun and some of the others that had come out at that time period, the box sets that were really cool. And the one that we really, really fell in love with, though, was Planescape. And the idea of the city of Sigil and how that was the city of doors. And we had a lot of adventures using Planescape and stuff as well, too. Then we began to dabble with things like Magic the Gathering and Blood Wars, which was a card game that was based on the Planescape setting for D&D, when we bought billions of. In fact, I still think I have some boxes of those cards left laying around. And while they weren't quite as cool as Magic the Gathering, it fit in the thing. It gave us that sort of, when we couldn't play D&D, we could still play in that universe. My all-time favorite product, though, from the second edition line, and this is the main reason why I really want to delve back into second edition, because I want to use this product again. And I've been looking for ways to make this work with like fifth edition or some of the other sort of OSR products. And while I could probably make that work, they are very specifically second edition formatted, and I really, really can't wait to get these to a table again. And that would be these. The trading cards. These were the coolest things, and I'm going to do a completely separate video just going over this, because I think this deserves a lot of attention in this series that we're going to do with reintroducing ourselves to second edition. My original set that I had from college has again disappeared. I had 2 cards left from my original set, and it was Wolfgar and Dritz Duerden. And while I was at GaryCon this past beginning of this year, I was able to take them and get Larry Elmore to sign both of them. And I'll show those to you when I do this. But a friend of mine about a year ago was at a Half Price Books and found this box for $15 and picked it up for me and brought it home. And while the box itself has seen better days, it's still intact. It's kind of beat up. The cards inside had never been touched. They were still so new that some of them were still kind of stuck together from the production, putting in the box and stuff. But this was my all-time favorite product, and I would pour over all of these cards. Now, if you don't know what these are, these have artwork from the different cards, as you can see here, on the front of them, and the actual artwork by the artists from different novels or from the books themselves. And On the back side of the cards, there were the stats for each of these sort of things. Whether it be a creature, whether it be a magic item, whether it be a character, an NPC, the stats were on the back of this and they were easy to reference. So I want to do a whole video kind of on these and showing you some of the cards that are involved in this and stuff as well. I know that Gale Force 9 is starting to do some of those things for 5th edition now. The spell cards, the monster cards, the item cards and stuff. I just don't feel like the quality that Gale Force 9... Now, while they're nice and they're like laminated and they're, you know, high quality cards, I feel like the quality of these cards was far beyond anything that's ever come out from Wizards of the Coast or TSR or that D&D as a whole. These cards are beautifully rendered. The artwork is stunning. The card quality is great. They're sort of the same size as a baseball card, have that same sort of texture as a baseball card and stuff as well too. But I feel like this is one of, in my personal opinion, I feel like this is one of the coolest products they have ever put out for D&D. And there's several of these. I think there's 3 or maybe 4 of these. There was like the 91 collection, the 92, the 93. There was I think 93 was a smaller gold box edition. And I'll be seeking those out as well too. So if anybody out there actually has a copy of those that you want to get rid of, hit me up. I'll totally take them off your hands for you and give them a good home. But this is the only one I currently have. And like I said, I'm going to do a whole video just talking about these and comparing these to some of the new stuff that's coming out from 5th edition as well too. But let's get back to the core rulebook. So over the past couple of days, I've been reading over this thing again. And it has reawoken a passion in me for this game that I had completely forgotten that I had. Now, I've had a passion for role-playing since that first time I was introduced to the game. But this game had really captured my imagination. And I can honestly say, with 100% certainty, that it was this book and a history teacher from high school that inspired me to go on to study history in college. I say that because in this book, when you're reading through it, there are little sidebars, little blue sidebars that not only included optional rules, but would also include small little like examples of historical things. So when you're reading over the warrior archetype, there would be a little sidebar and says, what is a warrior historically? And they would talk about King Arthur and Beowulf and Joan of Arc and you know, all these different sort of historical figures that would fit into that particular archetype. When they talk about druids and they talk about wizards, you know, you got Merlin and you got, you know, they talk about Richard the Lionheart and Robin Hood. And it sparked me enough interest to go to my school library and check out every book I could find on King Arthur and Beowulf and all of these historical figures. Merlin, the Arthurian tales, things reading about Joan of Arc, all those kinds of things. And then from there, went to my high school history teacher and began to just pour over him for his knowledge of any of these kinds of people. Alexander the Great became one of my favorite historical figures, and I read everything I could about him, wrote several papers about him and Arthur and Dracula in college. You know, historical figures. And my main sort of focus and my main sort of passion and drive behind these ideas was how they fit into sort of folklore and mythology of history. Thus, D&D, right? So I'm trying to find out these historical figures. So let's take, for instance, Dracula, right? We know Dracula via pop culture because of Bram Stoker. And Bram Stoker took the idea of the historical Vlad Dracula, or Dracula, and immortalized him into making him a vampire. Now, why? Where did the idea of a vampire come from? That spurred me on to studying the actual historical Dracula, or, as Dracula means, the son of the dragon. And I began to dive into that research and into that lore and find out how historical figures sort of fit into the folklore and the mythology that we now know them more popular of today. Same thing with King Arthur. We think of like Le Morte d'Arthur, some of these more popularized movies of King Arthur, of this, you know, valiant knight in armor on horseback and Excalibur and Camelot. where did all those stories come from, and how did we get to the sort of folklore and mythology that we have today? Those are the things I wanted to explore, and those are the things that drove me on into college to study history and languages and mythology and folklore. And it was all because of this book. So when I cracked this back open after listening to Jason talk on his channel about this stuff and having briefly talked to him via private message and stuff, I realized that the passion that I had for this game, and it's been reignited, and I cannot wait to fully get a grasp back of this game. And because while modern D&D 5th edition is similar, it still encapsulates the D20 aspect of things. It has changed, it has evolved, and it has become a more modern game. And I want to explore and check out what it is that really captured about this. Now, the big draw, I don't want to call it a drawback, because for me, it was just a natural thing. This is where I sort of really got my meat and potatoes. This is where I really began. So THAC0, or THAC0, or however you want to pronounce it, 2-hit armor class 0, has become sort of a catchphrase for crunchy rules, right? Everybody's like, oh God, not THAC0 again. We can't do that anymore. That's old hat. It's old school kind of thing. But I love it, and to me, it always made sense, because that's what I started with it. You spend so much time with it that it becomes a very natural thing, and it does involve a little bit of math and a little bit of thinking on your feet when it comes to crunching numbers and stuff. But I think it's one of those things that when you experience it enough times, when you use it, when you keep immersing yourself into that sort of dice mechanic, it becomes very natural for you. And I can't wait to forget that to be a natural thing for me again. Reading over the rules for it, I realized that we used a lot of the optional rules when we played, and things like weapon speed for initiative and all those kinds of things, which are things that could really bog a game down. And now, kind of recollecting back on some of our game sessions, I realized that, yeah, some of our combats took hours to play out, but we had so much fun with it. And I want to grasp what it was that made this game so spectacular for me. And every time I flip to a new page and read a new passage and I look at these old spells and stuff, it really comes back to me, and it really reignites that passion for me. So I can't wait to continue to share this journey with all of you, and hopefully inspire some of you to either, if you haven't picked this up, to go do so, or if it's on your shelf just gathering dust, to pull it off and take another look back at this game, and sort of revive the old ways once again. And like I said, it's going to be a video series. We're going to go over several of the different books. We're going to go over character creation. We're also going to talk about the cards, and I'll also bring up a whole video on how you can sort of experience second edition, even if you don't have access to the second edition books. So until next time, I am Questwise, and I am out.